In today's video, we are going to look at a game played between Khalid Abdul Razak versus Postny Evgeny in English opening in Egypt 2008. So let's start with our game. Knight f3, knight f6, c4, e6, knight c3, bishop b4, and queen c2. I think actually White's idea was to avoid the most known theoretical lines over here because of the difference in rating. Khalid Abdul Razak was 2406 and Postny was 2674. So that's why I think he avoided the opening lines. Now c5, a3, bishop a5, and now over here our title comes that let's stop thinking about the positional maneuvers, positional planning, and extra, etc. Let's see some action over here. And here, white is attacking the actually king side very strongly, and it is already very hard actually for black to castle on the king side. Mm. Black played the move d6 instead, but there is one game in this position which has been played, and that was uh, between Van Valley and Nadish. And in that game, he went out for the move knight c6, g5, knight h5, knight e4, d6, e3. The point of this e3 move actually over here on the board, if you look at, the point is that white wants to play the move, sacrifice his pawn over here for the immediate development of his bishop. This is the point. But in the game, he went out for the move d6 over here. And now on the next move, black is saying that I'm going to play the move h6, stopping your knight coming over here and stopping your pawn coming over here. And g5 by white was played as knight was hit. I want you people to pause the video and think I'm going to give you two options over here. One is which is in knight fd7 and the second one is knight h5. Which would you consider and why would you consider that? The move played in the game was knight fd7. And I think black thought that he was playing correctly, and but the problem is that knight is active over here on h5, more active than over here on fd7. I want to show you that why knight fd7 is a bad move, because he is going to develop his knight to c6. This bishop of his would be blocked over here. Whenever white plays this move with the support of this rook, this bishop would have to go back. And you will see that all of these five pieces would be over here on just these squares. And there will be no defense for the black king over here on the king side. So that's why this move was wrong. Instead, knight h5 was active on. Because after that, black was going to play the move bishop, knight to c6, bishop to d7. He was going to castle, knight c6. And this was the best way. The queen might come over here, defending, doing the defense, and this bishop can move back to c7, and then this pawn could be moved. And this was the best way, but in the game, he went out for the move knight fd7. Now white played the move knight e4. And here he is threatening the pawn on d6. So bishop has to move back. Bishop to c7. Instead of over here, if black tries the move queen e7, then the problem is the move b4. White is sacrificing the pawn. If you take it, he take it. Bishop into pawn. Now the problem is queen b2. It is threatening the bishop and it is eyeing this pawn over here. That's why after this move, knight to e4, bishop returned back to protect this pawn. And you are going to see that all of these black pieces are going to be on these squares. So in the game, b4 was played as the bishop is coming to b2 and eyeing the diagonal a1, h8. Now knight c6 by black. Now black is threatening to take the pawn on b4. But who is saying to protect that pawn? Bishop e2. Eyeing for the diagonal, hitting the pawn. Now how to protect it? If you play the move rook to g8, you will lose the right to castle. So that's why to protect it, you are going to play the move e5. But there was another continuation also. Castle. Rook g1, now e5. And this was the best way actually to stop the attack of white, which was very gruesome. But in the game, he went out for the move instead e5 over here. But now the problem is that h4. Now white is threatening to play the move h4. How to counter it? I want you people to pause the video as this is the middle game and you people have to think with me that you know that what is the threat. Now you have to counter it. How you are going to counter it? Whether are you going to play the move h6? Are you going to play the move g6? Are you saying that you are going to grab the pawn instead of playing both of these two moves? What would be the move you would prefer in this position? And the move was seen to be 4 because it weakens the square for the knight. And here how black is saying that I'm going to bring my knight over here on c5 on the next move. I'm going to give you two options. You can take this pawn. This is the one option. You can develop your bishop to g2. This is the second option. You have the third option playing the move h5. All these options are good, but the move which was played in the game was d4. The point of this move was that I am going to sacrifice this pawn, but I am going to open up this whole center. This was the concept behind white's plan. B into a3 was played in the game. Bishop into a3. Now black castled. And now black is threatening to take the pawn. Sorry, black is threatening to take the pawn. How to continue? It is not an easy game. Going to hit the knight. This pawn is weak. Your bishop and your knight are threatening this pawn. You need this diagonal to be opened. So you hit the knight. Knight d4 was played in the game and that was a little bit mistake. Instead of it, he should have gone for bishop a5 check first. King d1, now knight b4 hitting the queen. If you grab the knight, you will lose your one of the most attacking pieces. So that's why queen b3. Now knight c5, hitting the queen. Knight into knight, d into c5. Knight into pawn, giving back the pawn. Now f6, g into f6 and rook into f6. And this was the best way to continue for black. But instead he went out for the move knight d4. Now knight into d4, and now he played the move bishop a5 check. But now you see the difference. There is no knight to threaten this queen over here. Instead, it was best to go for the move into d4. After knight into d6, knight e5, and the position was equal. But now he went out for the move bishop a5 check. Now king d1, and now you may see that this king is not being castled, but it is more safe than this black king. Into d4. Now knight into d6, bishop c3, protecting the pawn and hitting the rook. Rook a2 was played. I want you people to pause the video and think that what happens if you play the move rook b1. Just pause and think. What happens if you play the move rook b1? The problem is that by playing the move rook b1, you loses the initiative in the game because now queen a5 hitting your bishop. Knight has to move back to protect the bishop, and now a6 challenging the knight. So that's why rook a2 keeping the rook on this file. Knight e5 hitting the pawn on c4. 3. And this was a little bit a mistake from white's end. Best move was to eliminate this protector, controller of light squares. Because knight into c8, rook into c8, bishop into f8, knight into c4, and now the move e4, hitting the knight. King f8, now bishop into c4, rook into c4, and rook into a7. And in this way, white was better actually. But now, after e3, the problem is bishop g4 check. Now black's last one of the last pieces has got active. King c1 and now bishop f3, hitting the rook and saying that I am going to control this diagonal afterwards by the support. Rook h3 was played. And usually, this move is not considered very well. Instead of it is being taught when you are learning chess that keep the rooks on active files. But here this move rook h3 is very best. It is hitting the bishop, being protected by the bishop, and it is going to move over here on g3, and these pawns are going to move forward. So queen d7 was played by black. Now e into d4. Bishop into d4. And here white went wrong. The black's threat is to play the move g4. I want you people to pause the video and think that how white can keep the advantage in the game alive. You want to stop the threat of queen g4. How can you stop the threat of queen g4? The move in the game was played rook into f3, and that was a mistake. The best move was you are going to stop the queen from coming over here by exchanging the queens. Because now, if black says I'm not going to exchange the queens easily, queen into d7, bishop into d7, now rook b3. You are hitting the pawn, b6, protecting the pawn, now rook d2. You are hitting the bishop. Bishop has to move back, bishop c5, b into c5, b into c5, and now rook e3. You are hitting the knight, f6, protecting the knight, and now knight e4. You are creating pressure on this pawn, and you are also saying that I'm going to win this pawn. But in the game, he went out for rook into f3, taking the bishop. Now knight into f3, and now he played the move queen f5, but at the wrong moment. Now the position is so equal. Knight e5 was played by black because black is saying I'm going to give the queen, but on my terms. White said, okay. I also do not want to exchange the queens. Now the bishop is threatened and the knight is threatened. How to save both of them? Pause the video and think that how to save both of them. How can you save this bishop? White wants to take the bishop. How you can save this bishop? And the move is simple one. That queen g4. Now white would have to exchange the queens. Queen into g4, knight into g4. And now knight f5 threatening the bishop. Bishop has to move. So bishop b6. Now this is the position in front of us. The pawns are equal, the pieces are equal. Now white is threatening to take the rook. So how to continue in this position? I want you people to pause the video and think that it is white's to move and how he should continue. And the move he made in the game was a tremendous one. You are threatening to take the rook. Is there any better move than this in this position than taking the rook? Yes, there is. And the move is c5. I have two bishops, and these two pawns would be a monster. So that's why I don't need your rook. That's why this is an unusual game, not a usual one. D8 by black, now rook e2. The point of rook e2 is that now this rook is struck. This rook can't move to e8. And that was really an awesome move. And the second thing to rook e2 move is that now it is threatening to play the move rook e4. And then this knight would have no better squares to go to. Here black made a mistake and played the move. Sorry. Uh, Not here. He played the move f6 uh, to exchange these pawns and make some escape route for his knight. Bishop to h3. Hitting the knight. Now knight e5. Now black is threatening to give the check. Then he want to maneuver his knight over here, hitting the bishop and controlling this square and hitting this pawn. Now how you can stop this check? You will have to move your king. There are two best squares. One is king c2 The second one is king b1. Which square you think is the best for king to move to? In the game, he played the move king b1, but king c2 was better, protecting these squares. He played the move knight c4, hitting the bishop, but the best way was to play the move knight d3. The idea was still that he was going to play the move knight f4. That was the best move. But in the game, he went out for the move knight c4, hitting the bishop. Now bishop c1, bishop a5. Now you have these two pawns, and you want to create one of them a passed pawn. Now pause the video and think that how you can create this thing. How can you create a passed pawn out of these two pawns? And the move was rook c2, hitting the knight. The knight has to move back, knight e5. Now first, knight t6. You are hitting the pawn on b7. F into g5, bishop e6 check. King has to be far away. King h8. Now h into g5. Now bishop c7, hitting the knight. Now what to do? You can't take this pawn because then this rook will pin your knight. Now I want you people to pause the video and again think this is not an easy game actually. What is the best move for over here for white in this position? Are you going to move your knight? Or are you going to make another move? See, one of your pieces are not developed. And that one is your bishop. What is the best square for it? And that one is bishop e3. Now bishop into d6, c into d6. Now knight f7. Hitting the pawn. Now d7. And here, now white is threatening to play the move bishop c5. And white is roundabout winning in this position. So that's why to stop this threat, bishop coming over here, black played the move b6 himself. But now bishop f4. Still trying to control these diagonals. Rook a8. Now rook c8. Now white's threat is bishop to c7. But black can't hold it because after king g8 there was no way actually to stop it. King g6, hitting the knight, h into g6. And now you see that this king is very far away. The pin is very dangerous. Bishop c7 hitting the rook, rook into c8, pawn into queen, rook into c8, bishop into rook. And that was actually a game over, but they made at least 3 to 4 moves more. King f8, d6, king e8, now f4, g5 and bishop e6. Now threatening to take the knight. And here at last black resigned the game. So what do you learn from this game? The thing you learned from this game is that you want you will have to create plans to make your pieces more active and get the space out from your opponent pieces. This is the plan you must have in your mind. So if you like my video, kindly subscribe and hit the bell icon button. Thank you very much.